Our true story begins in apartment number 8 on Luis Marin Street in Madrid, Spain, with Stefania, the heroine of our story. Stefania lived with her mother, Concepcion, her father, Maximo, and she had 6 other sisters. They were all in school, which was just a few minutes away from home. Stefania and her sisters were top students and loved spending time with their friends. Stefania was the leader of the group. Known for being a friendly and cheerful child, she had a strong maternal instinct, which made her always take care of her younger sisters and be their leader. Stefania and her sisters were more friends than siblings. During this time, Stefania's grandfather began to fall ill, so Concepcion had to take care of him at home, especially after he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Despite the strained relationship between Concepcion and her father, things worsened after his diagnosis as he became a grumpy and violent man, treating his daughter and grandchildren badly, except for Maria and Ayla, with whom he spent most of his time. As the years passed, the grandfather's illness worsened until he was on his deathbed. His children and grandchildren gathered to bid him farewell. Just before dying, he whispered to Stefania, "If I haven't hurt you in this life, I will in the next." These were his last words to his young granddaughter, Stefania. Days passed, and Stefania's life with her family returned to normal until the day everything changed. On an ordinary school day, Stefania noticed that her friend had bought a Ouija board. Curious, Stefania wanted to try playing it at any cost. After school, Stefania and her friends decided to gather and play Ouija in an attempt to communicate with a friend who had recently died in a motorcycle accident. In the bathroom, Stefania was with 3 of her friends and her sister Marianella, who refused to participate and just wanted to watch. The game began, and Stefania asked the board, "What is your name?" The pointer moved under Stefania's hand, spelling out Veronica. Stefania became nervous, but her friends encouraged her to ask another question. So Stefania asked who Veronica was, and the pointer spelled out, "Your grandfather." Stefania realized that Veronica was actually the spirit of her recently deceased grandfather. Suddenly, the bathroom door closed. Marianella collapsed while trying to open it, but to no avail. A teacher heard their voices and tried to open the door with all her might until she finally succeeded. She entered the bathroom and was shocked to find them playing Ouija. Stefania and her friends were scared. The Ouija board's glass broke, and suddenly, black smoke filled the entire bathroom. The smoke started to dissipate, and everyone witnessed it entering Stefania's nose and mouth, being absorbed into her. At the same time, the curtains were rising and falling. After that incident, everyone left the bathroom and strange events began to occur. Suddenly, one of Stefania's friends felt a heaviness on his chest. When he quickly looked in the mirror, he was shocked to see a large black mark on his chest, as if someone had stood on him with heavy shoes. As for Marianella, she suddenly felt a significant drop in her body temperature, and a cold hand grabbed and lifted her off the ground for a second. Stefania, meanwhile, continued to scream hysterically, as if she were seeing something no one else could see. The teacher who had opened the bathroom door, witnessing what happened to the children, quickly fled the school and decided never to return to teaching. Time passed since the incident, but Stefania was no longer the same. Once a cheerful and lively person, she became silent and terrified all the time, losing the vitality and passion that once defined her. Initially, none of her sisters noticed the change, but after a while, they realized something was wrong. Stefania couldn't sleep due to insomnia, and when she did sleep, she had terrifying nightmares. Strange creatures called out to her and chased her in her dreams. Because of these nightmares, Stefania became sensitive and irritable to everything around her. Eventually, she began to see her nightmares in reality. She saw faceless human figures calling out to her, asking her to follow them. Stefania told her family everything she was suffering from, but they reassured her it was just hallucinations caused by her nightmares. One day, Stefania fell to the ground. Her eyes turned white, foam came out of her mouth, and she was in a state similar to those suffering from epilepsy. However, epilepsy patients don't suffer from auditory and visual hallucinations. Therefore, Stefania's family decided to consult specialized doctors. Stefania continued to visit doctors for 6 months, but none could diagnose her condition because she didn't exhibit typical symptoms of epilepsy, which they could treat. Eventually, one of the doctors prescribed her psychiatric medications used for treating epilepsy, depression, and other mental disorders, but there was no improvement. Strange things began happening in the house. Objects moved on their own, lights and doors closed by themselves. Stefania's sisters felt an unseen force pulling them by their arms and bumping them into walls. The house turned into a battlefield, with no one understanding what was happening. One night, while Marianella was sleeping next to her sister Stefania, she was suddenly awakened by the sound of the bed shaking. When she opened her eyes, she saw Stefania floating above the bed as if someone was lifting her. This event left Marianella and the entire family in shock. They all started witnessing Stefania's nightmares with their own eyes. Loud noises were heard everywhere, day and night. However, the bathroom was where the strangest events occurred. One day, Stefania entered the bathroom and suddenly began screaming hysterically. Her mother ran to save her, but the bathroom door suddenly closed on them. They both screamed until Maximo arrived and tried with all his strength to open the door, but it was in vain. He asked them to step back so he could break the door, but just before he could, the door opened on its own. The family decided never to use that bathroom again. Fortunately, they had another one in the house. Neighbors and friends who heard about the happenings decided to visit Stefania. More than 20 people witnessed the strange events occurring to the family. One of Stefania's mother's friends felt someone hitting her leg. Other friends saw strange shapes moving around the house. One day, while one of Stefania's siblings was eating at the table, a glass cup suddenly flew towards him at high speed. In the nick of time, he ducked, and the cup passed over him and shattered by itself in midair. During this period, Stefania's behavior deteriorated further. She felt that she was going to die to the extent that she asked her mother not to let anyone from her father's family attend her funeral. She also requested that a photo of her with her father be buried with her. This request devastated her mother, who tried to reassure Stefania that she would not die. However, Stefania's response was odd. She suddenly screamed at her mother, warning her that she would continue to cause trouble if her wishes were not fulfilled. One day, Dimitri, one of Stefania's friends, came to visit her and her sisters. Suddenly, Dimitri fell to the ground, convulsing as if he had an epileptic seizure. Stefania's mother tried to revive him, but Dimitri lost control and began attacking them with seemingly supernatural strength. Stefania's mother decided to call 911. When the officers arrived, they struggled to restrain Dimitri, who continued his assault on them and anyone who tried to approach him. An officer threatened to shoot Dimitri if he broke free from the handcuffs. Neighbors heard the strange noises coming from Stefania's house and gathered around to assist the police. Among them was a priest who, upon seeing Dimitri, declared that he was bewitched. Dimitri tried to attack the priest, but fortunately missed. Everyone tried to subdue Dimitri until they were able to get him to a hospital. When Dimitri regained consciousness, he claimed not to remember anything that had happened. He recalled playing another game related to spirits, similar to the Ouija board, and mentioned that Stefania, distressed by her own condition, had offered her soul. He remembered seeing the flame of a candle rise to the ceiling, and then remembered nothing more. Everyone was puzzled whether Stefania was suffering from epilepsy, and what the chances were that Dimitri would suddenly develop the same condition. The situation continued until the summer of 1991, when Stefania turned 18. During this period, Stefania's epileptic episodes increased more than ever before. One day, she told her parents that she would die before them and that the human figures she saw were calling her. One day, while sitting with her sister Marianella, Stefania suddenly attacked her and then fell to the ground, writhing and crying until she passed out. When she regained consciousness, she did not remember attacking her sister. The day passed peacefully until the evening when Stefania had another epileptic seizure and lost consciousness. This time, she remained unconscious for over an hour, forcing her family to take her to the hospital. Stefania's coma lasted weeks until one day she died under mysterious circumstances. None of the doctors could explain her death other than as a heart attack, despite no indications of illness or risk of death. Stefania's family was deeply saddened, and her death remained a great mystery that neither priests nor doctors could explain. After a while, Stefania's family tried to forget the ordeals they had experienced, but things didn't end with Stefania's death. One day, they noticed scratches appearing on the walls of their house and discovered that all the crosses hung in the house were turned upside down. Every time they put them back in place, they would turn upside down again. Stefania's mother began hearing her daughter's voice calling her, especially from the sealed bathroom. They again saw dark figures roaming the corridors of the house. Maximo decided to nail the bathroom door shut and fix the crosses to the wall so they wouldn't move. However, they were shocked to find the crosses turned upside down again as if they had not been nailed in place. One day, Stefania's mother heard a loud noise coming from her deceased daughter's room. When she went to check, she found all of Stefania's belongings scattered on the floor. Suddenly, she heard an evil laughter of an elderly person in the corridor. After hearing the voice several times, Stefania's mother realized it was her deceased father's voice, the same man who had promised to harm them in the next life before he died. She felt that her father was fulfilling his promise and returning to take revenge. The family was gripped by terror, especially Stefania's younger sisters, who woke up every day feeling invisible hands grabbing them and dragging them towards the walls. They suffered different disturbances every night, unsure of what would happen next. One day, Marianella and her sister saw the shadow of a person arranging toys in the room. They all agreed that they saw frightening figures dressed like monks. Noises spread throughout the rooms of the house until the family reached their limit of endurance. They decided to bring in paranormal experts to help them. The experts said that the bathroom in their house was a gateway between this world and the other, and a starting point for spirits. Maximo decided to demolish the bathroom and completely seal the door. The paranormal investigators tried to help Stefania's family until they declared the house clean and safe. They said that the cause of the happenings was the spirit of Stefania's grandfather trying to harm them, while Stefania's spirit was trying to save them. During their investigations, using a device that captures strange sounds, they heard a voice saying, "Be careful of the grandfather." After the investigation concluded, Stefania's family thought they had found peace, but everything returned to the way it was before, and even worse. The family decided to bring in a monk for help, who told them that their house was haunted by a demon named Crafola. However, Maximo didn't believe the monk. Stefania's mother decided to sprinkle flour on the floor to see if someone was inhabiting their house. The next day, they found footprints of a large shoe, matching the same shoe that had appeared on Stefania's friend's chest when they played with the Ouija board. It was the same type of shoe worn by Stefania's grandfather. Maximo decided to take his family on a trip to distance themselves from the house. Before leaving, he conducted one last experiment. He tied all the doors of the house with ropes connected to each other and traveled with his family. After a week, they returned to find all the ropes cut, a clear indication that something was in the house. The situation continued until November 1992, when Marianella and her sister saw the shadow of a faceless person crawling on the floor, covered in thorns. The sisters screamed, and their father quickly gathered his daughters. Upon turning on the light, he found all the toys on the floor and his daughters trembling with fear. On November 19th, 1992, the same figure the sisters had seen returned, but this time the entire family witnessed it. The air turned as cold as ice. Unable to bear their presence in the house any longer, Maximo quickly called the national police, and he and his family waited outside. 5 police officers arrived at the house, and after some convincing, Maximo agreed to enter with them, accompanied by 3 officers and his son. They began hearing strange sounds coming from different parts of the apartment. When one of them turned on the light, they saw footprints on the dining table. They followed the sound, which led them to Maximo and his wife's room. Suddenly, the light turned off and the closet door slammed open with such force that the officer narrowly avoided it, which could have been fatal. Shocked by what they had seen, the officers quickly left the room terrified. They continued searching the house until they heard a noise coming from Stefania's room. Upon turning on the light, they saw the cross flipping over and then falling to the ground. Then they witnessed scratch marks forming on the wall right before their eyes. They decided to enter the sealed bathroom, where they immediately felt a drastic drop in temperature. After completing their search, the leading officer submitted an official report to the police, confirming the terrifying events in the house, which he found inexplicable. The officers testified that they saw lights turning off and on by themselves, doors closing on them, sudden drops in temperature, and crosses falling to the ground. None of them could explain or rationalize what had happened. The situation in Stefania's house continued until 1993, the day Stefania's mother saw her daughter's picture fallen on the floor. When she picked it up, she felt something burning her hand. Suddenly, she noticed Stefania's face in the picture was burnt, without any effect on the rest of the picture or even the frame and glass. The situation persisted until 1996. Photographers and journalists began visiting the family to capture the house. The strangest occurrence was that every time they entered the bathroom, the camera batteries would drain and no one could take any pictures. They decided to place a voice recorder in the house. After a few days, they heard a man and a woman cursing the investigators and journalists, asking them to leave. One day, relatives of the family requested to exhume the body of their son, who was buried under Stefania. Stefania's mother remembered her daughter's request to be buried with a picture of her and her father. She placed the picture, finally fulfilling her daughter's wish. In October 1996, all the strange phenomena stopped. However, fear continued to haunt Stefania's family, and they eventually managed to buy a new apartment to live in. The family eventually forgot everything that had happened to them. In 2006, a television program covering the case was released. During an interview, a strange voice recording was heard saying, "We have not started yet." After a long time, Marianella wrote a book about her and her family's experience with her sister Stefania, both in life and after her death.